Hello, Emmy. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Hey, well, you know who I am, but for the rest of the world out there, my name is Susan Hogarth, and I am one of the co-founders here at Moving the Human Spirit. And we do a trauma-informed coaching certification that Emmy took part of, I think, quite a while ago, actually. Now, like you're one of our senior coaches for sure in this
That's
area.
so funny. Yeah, I know. I was thinking about that today too because COVID has totally just, I don't know time anymore, but yeah, it's been almost a year since we started. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And we started this program in 2019. So definitely you were one of the first ones. So
Awesome.
congratulations on that for sure.
Thank you.
Right. I think so far we have around 300 or 400 coaches that are certified now internationally,
Wow.
and they come from all over the world. So it's a pleasure to
That's
have you
fantastic.
here.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to be
So,
here.
so as we get started in this conversation and that today, I really want to focus on who you are. And so tell us a little bit about you,
Mhm.
and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, awesome. So, my story is very interwoven with the work that I do. And, right on my website or on my page, you'll see both the words survivor and certified trauma coach. So, I am a trauma survivor of an abusive relationship that happened when I was a teenager. So, right on the cusp between what you would call, developmental childhood trauma and then like domestic violence kind of adult themes of trauma. So, it's a really interesting space that I'm, very passionate about helping people with in particular, but also, that's just my background. Um, and then fast forward through a lot of stuff, but today I am a trauma informed coach that I use my certification from from moving the human spirit, as well as some other certifications I've got, and lots of lived experience, lots of personal research in trauma and healing and recovery to create programs for clients and for students that combine coaching with psychoeducation and sort of like self-development empowerment work. I also am very passionate about speaking and writing, so I love kind of doing lots of things with different platforms. I am on Instagram and TikTok, and done some good interviews and things like that, because a big part of my mission is trying to get this information out to as many people as possible, even if they aren't able to invest in coaching or they're not ready for that. But trying to reach people that have lived with trauma and may never had language to support themselves or to understand themselves. So
Yeah.
that's a little bit about me. I live in Portland, Oregon, in the US. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Well, and you touched on a lot of different things there. And I think it's important for people to understand, anyone that wants to go through the trauma informed coaching program, that they don't just have to come from one specific background of trauma. Trauma affects
Right.
so many different lifestyles and different people, and we all will absorb that information in a very different way because of our social, economic, backgrounds and that. So what
Yeah.
might be a traumatic event for you might not have been a traumatic event for me. I always kind of use a car accident as an example,
Yeah.
right? Very simple thing. And yeah, and we will both create two different things. I often think about, I have five sisters, there's five girls in our family. And we all grew up in the same household, same parents, but all five of us have a very, very different outlook at our upbringing.
Yep.
So it's very interesting to watch and see.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. Okay. So you talked about a little bit about how your journey in that began.
Oh,
And so tell me then a little bit about, what was your deep dive into making the decision to become a trauma informed coach?
yeah. Great question. So my journey to become a trauma informed coach really started with, the trauma that I myself went through and then my personal healing journey. So back in 2015 was kind of the first time I heard about PTSD and at the time I was very well versed in, oh, I have anxiety, I have depression, you know, all the time. And then my PTSD symptoms really kicked up, and, you know, kind of endured that, tried to ignore that for another year, and then finally went to therapy, got the language of, okay, this is post-traumatic stress disorder. And really, you know, the way my brain works is I get information and then I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to use my force of will to kind of like figure this out and, you know, heal myself essentially, or get whatever goal I want. So I started, you know, therapy sessions would happen every other week. And then in between those calls, I would be listening to the podcast, reading the books, you know, just educating myself on trauma, because I was, you know, completely focused on healing and getting better. And at the beginning, this largely came from a place of shame of like, I'm messed up, I'm broken, I'm bad. Those are all bad things to be. I want to move on. I want to like overcome my past. I want to transcend all this stuff. So I'm going to like willfully educate myself until that happens. And, you know, as you might suspect, that does not work. But you know, over time that started the journey, and that was very necessary. Over time, I started realizing, okay, this is not something that is just like a checklist of like, do this, do this, do this, do this, and you're healed. It's going to be kind of a lifelong journey. And it took me a while, but eventually I embraced that, and, you know, kind of have the identity of I'm a trauma survivor, and that doesn't define me. And, you know, everyone has different opinions with this, but before I had that identity and really like accepted that about myself, I was constantly trying to be someone I wasn't, someone that didn't have social anxiety, that wasn't triggered, that wasn't having nightmares all the time. You know, I was trying to be normal, and that was causing me a tremendous amount of stress. So over time, I sort of, you know, owned who I was, and, you know, continued on the healing path, did therapy. And looking back, I think a lot of my therapists were using coaching skills as well, which is super cool. But, you know, anyways, doing that work, and then on my own, continuing to read the books, journal, like just focus a lot on my healing and a lot less on everything else. So that went on for several years. And then around 2019, I started using Instagram as sort of a creative platform where I would do a lot of writing about trauma. And I decided to commit to 10 minutes of creativity every day in 2019. And I would post it on Instagram as sort of like almost like a journal or somewhere that you could look at and like see what you've done. And around 8 months into that, my posts started really taking off and getting some, you know, likes and whatever. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And anyways, so that's sort of where my Instagram began. And then as time was going on, I was making a lot of big strides in my healing journey and really starting to not be triggered all the time and not live a lifestyle that was causing me so much stress. So really starting to feel safe in my body and in my nervous system, and realizing through Instagram, although it's just, you know, at the time I was completely anonymous and the only interactions I was having with people were comments or messages, realizing like, oh, I've always had this deep desire to help people. I think I'm finally getting to the space where that feels good and doesn't feel like a burden. So I think when a lot of people witness my story, they see this later half, they see these last 2 years where I'm kind of holding space for others and like being really open and honest with my story in public, on the internet, with my face and everything attached to it. But that took multiple years of what I call kind of my hermit phase, of really just going inward and like not having a social life pretty much at all. And I'm extremely privileged to have had the opportunity to not only be able to work while I was doing that, but also have the money for therapy and have the time and resources to, I don't have kids to take care of, for example, to focus so much on myself. But anyways, it wasn't this like overnight success story. It took a lot of years. But anyways, so in 2020, I learned about coaching, and this is all when the pandemic kind of began, and, jobs were going bye-bye. I worked at a salad restaurant, making salads. I have a degree in environmental science, so I was kind of in between jobs. and, everything's shutting down. And I'm like, okay, well, I have this thing I'm growing and I'm doing tons of work for free. Where are there avenues that I could make this a career? And I discovered coaching, and I was like, this is so cool. So then I got certified, and, I found you all from just Google searching trauma-informed coaching, because I knew the work that I was going to do was going to be centered around trauma, no matter, like, for sure. I didn't want to be, kind of maybe just a life coach, or I don't know. There's lots of other options for the healing profession, but I wanted it to be centered on trauma. So that's how I found you guys. And yeah, that's kind of where my journey to become a trauma-informed coach happened.
Yeah, it's a mouthful, I know. Trauma-informed coaches. we call it TIC for short.
Right.
Endearing. Yeah. Okay, so when you were searching in that for us, there must have been multiple other organizations that came up in that as well for you. So why Moving the Human Spirit?
It's a great question. Yeah, I think, it's interesting. I don't think that there were that many options. Maybe there are more now. But I think if you still type in trauma-informed coach, boom, your website comes right up. I think honestly, the way the program was structured worked for me really well, the timing of it, and also the depth, I think it seems to go. So, going into this program, looking at your sales page, for example, I already know about how trauma impacts the brain. I know about the polyvagal theory. I know about a lot of the concepts that are covered, but that made me want to do it more, because I'm like, okay, they know what they're talking about. And it's not like I'm some expert, with degrees in this or anything, but just from my lived experience and from, the books I've read and things, it's like, okay, well, they're covering the material that should be covered, and they're combining it with how to be a coach. And that's really what I was, most invested in, is like, I know all this information and that's great, but I want to learn the skill set for how to hold space for someone in a coaching capacity, so I have confidence and I don't feel like a fraud, essentially. Like, I feel like I know what I'm doing and I can own this title. So your program, I feel like, had all those elements I was looking for. Yeah, and so it just felt like the right fit.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why we come up at the very top is because we're the world's only ICF accredited trauma-informed coaching certification.
Yes.
So yeah, so I have a feeling that's probably why we rank so high.
That's great. Yeah, well deserved. I mean, I'm sure that was a process to acquire that.
Oh, so. Yes, it was.
Yeah, right. I mean, because anyone can create a coaching program. Speaking from personal experience, I've created a coaching program, but to get it certified with the ICF is, that's real credentials. So that's very cool.
Yeah. And accreditation with ICF is definitely was a game changer in that for us, for sure. Okay, tell us a little bit about who is your perfect client? Describe them to me.
Yeah. So I love this question, because there's so much focus in like online business on niching and like coming down to this, like, who is your ideal client? And I've always, like, as someone I have a lot of what you would say like Venusian energy, as in Venus ruled astrology, whatever. And a lot of in my Enneagram, like in any personality type you take, I'm someone that does not want to exclude anyone ever. So when I hear things like you need to niche down and you need to not try to talk to everyone, that, I'm just like, no, I don't want to. But I think how it's worked for me is speaking from my personal experience and being very passionate about specific topics related to abusive relationships, shame, healing from shame, moving into self-love, empowerment, personal agency, reclaiming your power. Speaking on these topics has helped me, have clients that are very different in terms of their lifestyle, their age, places in the country or in the world that I've worked with. So pretty diverse demographics, but all connected in sort of this energy that I feel like is kind of hard to explain. But I did write some notes down for this because, I wanted to have a good answer.
Good. Excellent.
But I feel like it's generally someone who has been doing has been trying to heal from trauma on their own and or with a therapist for a while. Someone that's been aware of, I was abused or I have been through a traumatic event or something, and they have language. They know what trauma is. And if you spend a couple days around my page or on Instagram in the trauma informed world, you can learn a lot really quickly. So they might have self-educated quite a bit, but are realizing just learning all those things does not really, do anything necessarily. You certainly can, but basically are looking for support and looking for someone to encourage them and celebrate their wins and also be present and witness their pain. Because the reality is, as I'm sure you know, the world is not trauma informed. And I cannot tell you how many people have come to me and been like, I told my doctor that I wasn't comfortable, with like a pelvic exam, for example, and they did nothing to make me feel better. And it's just like, I'm sitting there like just so frustrated because it just seems like basic information to me because I am so immersed in it. But anyways, so just people that are kind of frustrated with a lack of trauma-informed world where people are constantly saying, well, it was the past. Like, I don't know why you can't just get over it. I don't know why you're always thinking about that. All those kind of things that people say, not out of malice typically, but to try to help you move through it. It's like, it doesn't apply to trauma. So I think they see me as someone that finally gets it. And even when I barely know their story and, with coaching, they don't sit there and process their memories or anything. I have this innate, trust going on because I've lived it myself. And I'm not going to force them to get better on any other timeline other than their own.
Well, and as a trauma-informed coach, you see them as whole and complete.
Right.
Yeah.
And extremely powerful. Like, that's what I always come back to is like, yeah, you might not be strong all the time. And our society puts such this emphasis on, if you're a strong survivor that overcame, then that's great. But if you're a weak victim, then, that's bad or something. And it's like trauma weakens you. Like, there is no denying it, it exhausts you. But you're always powerful. Like, you're still alive, you're still waking up. And, even that, it takes a tremendous amount of power. So I think kind of noticing, where is that power being tied up and where can we bring that back to support you and your body coming back to a feeling of safety.
Yeah. Wow. Spoken like a true coach.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All so important information, right? I just did like a 5-minute video on defining your niche market.
Oh, cool.
And living a life of passion and purpose. And everything that you just talked about is exactly what I talk about in there. It's like, what, you want to become a coach, that's great. What kind of coach do you want to become? And where do you scale on that from a 1 to 10? And it's like, if you're 6 or less, keep looking, and then start to look into your past and ask yourself, what's your mess? And people kind of go, what do you mean, what's my mess? And it's like, well, just take a moment, and if you were able to support one person move through that same thing, would that allow you to lead a life of passion and purpose? And like every single time, everybody just kind of goes, okay, that was like a really simple exercise. And yes, absolutely, that will lead me to a life of passion and purpose.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think as much as the coaching, I don't know how much I don't know how much our circles overlap, because I feel like your organization is very much grounded in like ICF coaches who are trained and certified, and that's incredibly legitimate. I'm more in the world of online coaching in terms of there's business coaches, marketing coaches, fitness coaches, and there is so much sketchiness, I want to say, that goes on because anyone can take the label of a coach.
Yes.
And I also think there's a tremendous amount of gatekeeping of saying, oh, nope, you're not allowed to talk about trauma because you're not a licensed therapist. And it's like, that is deeply upsetting to me, because it's like, I've known therapists that told me I did one lecture about trauma in my entire therapist education. And it's like, so you might be an awesome therapist, but I can still be an awesome trauma-informed coach And at the same time, it's up to me to be integrous with that, know my scope of practice, and not I don't do therapy, So yeah, it's really interesting. But anyways, coming back to what you were saying, I have a mentor named Tori Washington, and she talks a lot about what is the greatest story that you will ever tell.
Yep.
And it's like, what gets to exist in the world because you were born? And for me, that translates into what gets to exist in the world because you survived trauma, So I agree. I hear what you're saying. It's like, that's what's going to lead you to your life of purpose, is telling that story. And not everyone's going to be a coach doing that. Like, you can be an artist, a writer, a speaker, an educator,
Absolutely.
a nurse, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It'll show up in so many different realms, right? Whatever is right for you. Yeah, I truly believe that wholeheartedly, right? Like, we are put on this planet for a very specific reason. And some of us will go through a little bit of a bumpier time than others. But when we get to emerge from that as this beautiful flower, or whatever you want to call it, out of that, out of the shadows, and out of the shame, the empowerment that we give to ourselves is incredible and life-changing, not just for us, but for those that are in our surroundings as well. I think of coaches as the rock that gets dropped in the middle of a very calm pond, and then you get to see the ripple effects as it moves out, right? And the ripples get larger and larger as they move away from you.
Yeah.
So it's not just your own life that you're affecting, and it's not just the person that you're coaching that you're affecting, but you're affecting their family, their children, their spouses, their parents, and it just goes on and on and on, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That reminds me of, we talk a lot about, or at least I talk a lot about, intergenerational trauma and, the impacts trauma has on families and communities and culture at large. And it's also like, there's also such thing as intergenerational healing, or that the ripple effect, as you're talking about, is like, you're going to, as you change and develop, like, if that was for you alone, that would be enough. Absolutely. But I know a lot of people who are more motivated by helping others than helping themselves, me. So it's like, just realizing that your self-development, your healing process is going to benefit everyone around you. And that's gorgeous.
Yeah. There's so many times when I'm speaking to people, and they ask, like, why did you become a coach? And, and I tell my story and of why I became a coach and that. And, and I say to people, if I had never done anything with my coaching except keep it within my family dynamics, that would have been worth it for me.
Yeah.
But everything else that has come after the fact, moving the human spirit, Brad, our contract with the Canadian military, working with all of you amazing coaches that are going out there and doing what we started doing, that has been a bonus.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, okay. What was the next question I wanted to ask you? How have you utilized the knowledge that you have been given from the trauma-informed coaching certification? And I think, actually, before we touch on that, let's go back to something that you just said about, like, the trauma and the therapy and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we don't replace therapy, right? We do not treat and we do not diagnose. We are trauma-informed.
Yep.
And so we can work alongside therapists. We can work after somebody has worked with therapists and stuff like that. So now, coming from that point of that information, what did you gain when you went through the trauma-informed coaching certification?
Yeah, that's a great prompt to start it with, because I gained a tremendous amount of clarity of what coaching is. And I think, coaching is such a new concept, a new industry, that it's very easy to be skeptical of, and there's good reason to be skeptical of it. So, having a certification program that was backed by the ICF, which, if people watching this, International Coaching Federation, it made me feel much more secure that what I'm doing was legitimate and not just like in name or in certification, but learning about the actual practice of what is coaching and how does it differ. Because I've been in therapy, you know, on and off for 5 years, so I get it. I know what therapy is, but I've never been coached up until becoming one myself, and you know, having practice sessions and everything. And yeah, I think it really is, you know, a different thing, but like you said, it's very supportive alongside therapy or after therapy. And how I kind of see the trauma healing work is, you know, it comes in layers, and there's like the initial layer of breaking the cycle and not continuing to be traumatized or starting to traumatize others. You know, that's the foundation. And oftentimes people will be in therapy during that part as well. For me, I definitely didn't go to therapy until after I had done that. And then there's the step of, you know, treating trauma symptoms so you can function and like live a life and not be terrified every day in fight, flight, freeze, shut down all the time. And then there comes a time where you're like, okay, you know, I'm all right. I'm not in crisis mode, or like I have that being treated in therapy and we're working on that. But I want like mentorship, leadership, guidance, and like a deep level of support where I feel, you know, empowered as a whole being, like you were kind of describing. And, you know, it's like that's my belief of where trauma informed coaching comes in. And the analogy I always use when people ask is like thinking about if you had like a catastrophic knee injury. And so you go to get surgery or something, and then you have physical therapy to treat the injury and get you walking again. Then you're walking and you're still working with your physical therapist to, you know, continue your healing process. And you're like, cool, I want to run a 5K now. So you can either try to do that on your own. You can hire someone that's a running coach that has no idea what knee injuries impact the process, or you can hire a knee injury informed coach. You know, so that's where the trauma informed coach is. It's like, I get it. Like, I understand trauma a lot. You know, I've been studying it for years.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to treat your trauma. We're not going to go back and try to process those memories. That's what therapy is for. But we're going to look at, okay, where is trauma showing up in your beliefs about yourself, in your beliefs about the world? You know, so trying to do all that work on your own is possible. And that's, you know, that's kind of what I did, was trying to do it all on my own. But when you work with someone that's supportive, it can take the timeline and collapse it quite a bit.
Yeah.
Because you're not on your own anymore.
Yeah, exactly. You know, there's lots of times where people will say to me, well, how many sessions is this going to take?
Right.
And I'll say to them, well, how many years did it take for you to get into this position?
Right.
You know, you know, and they'll say, oh, well, it's been 5 years or 20 years or 40 years or whatever. And then I say, so would it be realistic to say that we're not going to have this completely finished in 3 sessions? You know?
Yeah.
And then it's kind of like, so you, as soon as you put it into perspective, people get it, right?
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, it's not an overnight fix. It is a journey. And, you know, and you touched on what we call the spiral of healing.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, that's the healing journey, right? You know, and sometimes it is 5 steps forward and 3 steps back. And sometimes it's 2 steps forward and a half a step back. And, you know, and sometimes it's 5 steps forward and no steps back.
Right.
So, you know, so, and that is the spiral of healing. Totally. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I guess I didn't quite answer ways I utilize the knowledge. But some of the things that I think were the most important for me about the certification course was the practice sessions and getting to work with each other and like having such a tight knit group of people. Because I've been in other trainings where there's like over 100 people, and we still did lots of breakout sessions. But I feel like in our class, we really had a good like cohort camaraderie feeling where you could like build trust with people, and like it made me feel much more comfortable practicing coaching with them, and you know, doing all those practice sessions to meet the certification guidelines. So I think there's a lot of value in that. And then, you know, of course, lots of the information we learn has been super relevant with me creating my programs and my courses and, the coaching sessions themselves. One of the things that I still use with every single client is the values assessment, where we look at, I'm obsessed with value. I love it. It was my favorite thing we did. So yeah, looking at, what are the things that you're valuing, and how does that, how does trauma influence those things? And, how does that strengthen your inner sense of connection to yourself? So that was one of my favorite parts for sure.
Nice. Good. Okay. Well, then you need to keep an eye out for August in the private Facebook page for TICC. So, because I'm going to be doing a demo on the values wheel.
Cool.
And I use that in every single intake. That is my very, very first session. So,
nice.
So keep an eye out for that one.
Awesome. Yeah, I know. I was the demo. Brad did it with me in the class, and I was just like me just from that one assessment. It was so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's powerful, right? I call it the light in the what do I call it? The flashlight for the dark places, right? And so when you understand those values and what they are, they become that window for you. And so when you understand that those values are being crossed consistently, which usually creates a moral injury, and then when that moral injury still continues to be crossed consistently, then it creates a traumatic event.
Yeah.
So when you're able to understand those core values as you're talking about, and you have a good solid, like, these are my core values. And as soon as it gets crossed, it's kind of like, no, hold on a second. We need to reframe this. Either I need to reframe it for myself, or I need to have a conversation with that person to have it reframed or moving in a different direction so that it is not crossing that boundary for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like once, something I feel inspired to mention is also how we cross our own values, or how we, so often are living according to values that someone else has given us and said, you're supposed to value success, or like even things like fame or something like that, like to be, I don't know, but really your value is peace or love or compassion or something. And you're like, why am I stressing myself out? I'm like talking about myself right now. Why am I stressing myself out every single day trying to hustle my way to my top when that's not even a value? I don't even care about that. Who gave me this value? And it's just like, it's so nice to have that as sort of like a guidepost for, doing self-development work and trying to understand what's going on in there.
Yeah. I work a lot with young adults. Right. When I first started coaching, my niche market was families with gifted and at-risk youth. And so I used to do this core values with these I would say they were mostly high school students. And when you gave them that empowerment for themselves and to be able to see that, it changed everything for them. A good majority of the anxiety went away. Because it empowered them to kind of say, no, that's not going to happen.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's an incredibly powerful tool. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
And bringing that up. It was a good sideline to our conversation.
Yeah.
What do you see as being some of your challenges in the work that you do?
Yeah, it's a great question. So some of the challenges that I see are, my biggest one is not taking my clients' problems as opportunities for me to fix or solve them. So I'm very naturally a kind of like problem solver, I guess you could say, or someone that wants to help. On the Enneagram, I'm a 2, which is called the helper.
Yeah.
And so it's like I every training I'm in, this is always like a big topic that's talked about for a long time, is like, it is not your job to fix people's problems. So I feel like that's just a matter of boundaries and a matter of understanding, like, what's this, what is going on here, and just kind of doing that like work on myself, because clients don't ever do that to me. They're not like, hey, you need to fix this for me ever. It's just like hearing someone's pain and being like, I must solve this. It's like, that is not helpful. Don't do that. So that's the one thing that is very challenging for me. But I feel like it's a work in progress. And then the other one that is definitely silence and just, slowing down and just kind of sitting and being present. So those are things that I'm always kind of continually practicing, getting better at, and not just filling it in with something. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, you know what? And I think all newer coaches probably would say something very similar to what you're just saying in that now. One of the things that I was learning when I was becoming a coach in that too, and I have it up on my vision board, it's like set yourself a goal. And so for me, the goal was to remain outside of somebody else's stuff, and then let go of the outcome and be open to something even better showing up.
That's nice. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. And you said something else. Now I've lost my train of thought. Anyways, we'll just go with that. And and I think it's important to know that we do not take on our clients. It is not our responsibility as the coach, right? Our coach is to hold space. That was the other one when you talked about silence.
Right.
So it's important to understand that when somebody has gone through any type of an event, or when they're processing information, that the human brain takes anywhere between 30 and 90 seconds to digest that information and then to be able to actually speak to it. So as a coach, our greatest reward is actually in that silence. And when it becomes, and when the silence becomes uncomfortable, you know that you've nailed the question.
Yeah. Good point.
Because they are processing.
Yeah. Need to write that down.
Yeah. So, what would be the next best question I could ask you?
Oh. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Well, the next best question you could ask me, I'm stumped. I don't know. I'm so I think that really outlines my comfort zone is answering questions, not coming up with them for myself.
Yeah, okay. That's a good answer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So for sure, right? That's my favorite coaching question.
Nice. Ooh, I like that. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think if we were within a coaching session right now, that could be very fruitful. But as an interview, I'm like, should we wrap up? I don't know.
Okay. Well, as we start coming to a close in that too, because I know you've got time commitments for sure. Yeah. So what advice would you give somebody if they were interested in becoming a trauma-informed coach?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think ultimately, if you have any interest or intrigue, definitely think about it, because if not, go for it, because I vehemently believe, or just strongly believe, that the world needs to be trauma informed if we're going to make any changes in any area of improving the world. Is we have to understand trauma. That's why I'm so obsessed with it. And I see people kind of criticizing the use of the word trauma, because I do understand sometimes it is misused. But I would much rather it be oversaid and sort of erring on the side of people are calling things trauma that aren't, than when I was going through trauma and I had never heard of the word outside of veterans and people that have near-death car accidents.
Yeah.
And so it's so many people experience childhood abuse or, emotional neglect, all sorts of developmental trauma. And they just tell themselves, no, my childhood was fine. I don't know why I'm like this. I don't know why I have trust issues. I don't know why I never feel good about myself, all that stuff. It's there's so much needless suffering because we don't understand what trauma is. So if you have that calling, if you're seeing this, the rise in people calling themselves trauma informed or pursuing that path, and you're like, wow, that sounds really good, I want to be a part of that, I don't see how it would hurt you at all. It's only going to provide you with more language, more compassion, more confidence with talking to people about what they've been through. So I think it would be incredibly beneficial. I definitely think, especially if you're a coach or a healer of any kind, it's integral. Like, it doesn't matter what kind of coach you are. I think, if I have a friend who's a personal trainer and she has done so much education around trauma and, might take the certification at some point, but she is deeply trauma informed. And I'm always just like, you are like amazing, because thinking about how someone's going to work with her and feel so seen and respected instead of forced and pressured and pushed, like, the more trauma informed you are, the better your clients are going to have a positive experience in your program, even if they don't identify as trauma survivors or having PTSD.
Yeah.
So that's my little speech for that. And then of course, if people are watching this and want to ask me questions, I'm always happy to answer questions about my experience. But yeah, it was incredibly positive, and I really don't see how it would not be. Everything was great. So
Yeah. So if somebody wanted to reach out to you, where could they do that?
Yeah, so email me, and maybe you can type this wherever you post this out, but it's,
okay, I will.
Yeah, blooming forward now. So like a flower, blooming forward now at gmail.com.
Okay.
That is where you can email me. I also have a website, and it's emmymarie.com. There's a contact form at the bottom at some point. So if you don't remember the email or something, you can use that. But my DMs on Instagram are just, I can't check. It's too overwhelming. So that's why I always want to stress email or website is the best way to reach me.
I'm the same way. So if anybody has any questions for me on the actual trauma-informed coaching and that themselves, then they can reach out to me, Susan at movingthehumanspirit.com. And they also, like you, we have a form on our website on traumainformedcoaching.com, and you can reach out to me that way in that as well. So great. Emmy, thank you so much for being one of our rocks that creates the ripple into the world of trauma-informed coaching. We truly appreciate who you are and how you've shown up in the world.
Thank you. Yes, I appreciate you too. Thank you for being the rock as well. And yeah, being supportive on my career path. So thank you.
Absolutely. We will talk soon and have a fantastic afternoon.
Thank you.